What is up, everybody? I want to welcome you back to my channel for today's video, which I am super excited for. Frost Death Knight has a ton going for them, especially in Mythic Plus, and we're going to go over how you can utilize and get the most out of their toolkit. Also, give me a follow on Twitter for live alerts on when I do release new content, and be sure to join our Disc community. I'll leave a link to both of those down below. And with that being said, let's hop right into this video. Alright guys, so here we are in Orgrimmar at the target dummies, and first thing I want to go over is going to be stat priority. Priority, you're going to want to prioritize strength over everything, but then mastery, crit, haste, and versatility. Mastery increases the damage of your frost abilities by whatever you have, mine being 42.4%, which is an insane increase. So moving forward, we're going to go into Covenant. A couple disclaimers with the Covenants. I want to say that you should go with whatever you really want to go. They have simmed up the Covenants, and really they're not too far off. It's just kind of a matter of what you want to do, the lore you want to follow, what you think has the coolest transmog, and just storyline. I would recommend going with what you find the coolest. With that being said, Kyrian is going to be your single target go-to to blow up bosses. The Kyrian ability is Shackle the Unworthy, and that admonishes your target for their past transgressions, reducing the damage they deal to you by 5% and dealing arcane damage over 14 seconds. While Shackle the Unworthy is active on an enemy, your direct damage attacks that spend runes have a 50% chance to spread Shackle the Unworthy to nearby enemies. And that arcane damage is going to be 178.5% of attack power. So it's a very strong single target DPS, and it does have that 50% chance to spread. So that's good for... But with that being said, Kyrian is going to just be for those who want big numbers on boss fights and are basically just looking to be on top during boss fights. So next is the Nightfang Covenant, which is actually the Covenant I ended up going with. Honestly, it was hard to pass up the shape. Being a Death Knight, we kind of lack mobility, and having that soul shape mobility is like huge, especially in Mythic Plus when you need to be moving around a lot. So we also get Depth's Dew. Depth's Dew corrupts the targeted ground, causing shadow damage against the targets within the area. Now it does replace Death and Decay, which is odd for a Frost Death Knight because we never really use Death and Decay. But here we are, and what happens is, so when you put down your Depth's Dew and then you hit with Obliterate, it actually crits onto other targets. So it becomes a cleave, which is nice because it pairs well with Pillar of Frost if you are running the Obliteration talent tree. With that being said, Nightfang has really been a well-rounded Covenant to go with. I would highly recommend Nightfang, but some people do kind of lean towards the next Covenant we're going to talk about, and that's going to be Venthyr. Venthyr is a strong choice if you're going to be doing the Breath of Cindergosa build, with the Death Knight class ability being Swarming Mist. Now Swarming Mist is a heavy mist that surrounds you for 8 seconds, increasing your dodge by 10%. Deals damage every 1 second to enemies within 10 yards. Every time it deals damage, you gain 3 runic power, up to a maximum of 15 runic power per second, which is absolutely insane. So I don't run Breath of Cindergosa. Here's your Breath of Cindergosa. And then you're going to have your Swarming Mist, which is just, it's going to be building up that runic power. And I mean, basically, they've said that you can actually get it up to a minute. See, look, I'm doing 4K DPS, which isn't bad at all. So going into that, let's not get too far ahead of ourselves. So the next and last Covenant is going to be the Necrolord. Necrolord is probably my least recommended. Not that the damage isn't valuable, it's just not the best. I actually simmed with another DK in a dungeon, and overall, my Death's Dew and his overall Abomination limb was really night and day. The Death's Dew with being a 30-second cooldown and Abomination limb being a 2-minute cooldown, it's hard to get the real AoE functionality out of it. With that being said, the Abominational limb is a cool play on like unholy DK lore, but this is a Frost DK guide, so let's move on. So moving into the talent trees, you're really only going to have 3 optimal builds. You're going to have your dual wield Breathless Nargosa, your dual wield Obliteration, and your two-handed Obliteration. All 3 being incredibly valuable and not really a big difference. To me, more so the dual wield build, it feels a little bit more like rewarding. The two-handed, it's just still kind of slow. You hit for big obliterations, which is great for boss fights, but overall, I think the damage throughout the dungeon or, the mall, whatever you're doing, I think the damage overall throughput is better with the dual wield. And that's just been my output. I do really like the two-handed build. It's nice, but it's just the dual wield is at this very moment more rewarding. I've simmed them both. It's just how I feel. All right, so moving into the talent tree, you're going to have 3 optimal builds to choose from. One being the dual wield Breathless Nargosa build, one being the dual wield Obliteration build, and one being the two-handed Obliteration build. If you chose the Vintir for your Covenant, you're pretty much obligated to play the dual wield Breathless Nargosa. That's sort of my downfall with Vintir, kind of locking you into just a one play style, which I think is one of the pluses about Frost Death Knight. Being that you can do incredibly large single target DPS as long as with doing incredibly large AoE DPS. So with Vintir locking you down, kind of I feel like just to the AoE side, that was kind of my deciding factor when it came to the Covenant choice. But moving forward, if you are doing a dual wield Obliteration guide, your talent tree should look somewhat like this. Cold Heart is a passive that gives you a stack of Cold Heart, causing your next chain of ice to deal 194 frost damage, stacking up to 20 times. So getting that 20 stack takes about 40 seconds, and I have noticed that the difference between the 15 and the 20 is actually pretty significant. Right now, see, I just critted for 7,771. It normally hits for a non-crit anywhere from 35 to 4,000 at my current build, and it does crit anywhere from 7 to 8k. So it's pretty good. I would recommend letting it get to that 20 stack before using it, but use at your own risk. So on our tier 2, we're going to use the Murderer's Sufficiency. Consuming the Killing Machine effect has a 50% chance to grant you 1 rune. That's just really good to have because, say you're in the middle of your burst and you're using your Pillar of Frost and you're building up everything, but you don't have a rune to use on your Obliteration. So, these rhymes proc pretty often, and having that rhyme proc with a 50% chance to grant you a rune is extremely helpful in your burst rotation. In tier 3, we're going to be choosing Blinding Sleet in most all Mythic Plus situations. Having the AoE stun is just going to be incredibly helpful. Rather it needs to be a mass interrupt or just taking a lot of damage and kind of want to just stun everybody. Nip it in the butt. So moving on to tier 4, I like to go with Avalanche. Avalanche is casting Howling Blast with Rhyme active causes jagged icicles to fall on enemies nearby your target, dealing 389 frost damage. So I've simmed it, and I think Avalanche is better than Frozen Pulse. Frozen Pulse, while you have fewer than 3 full runes, your auto attack Radiate Intense Cold, inflicting 87 damage on all nearby enemies. So what you need to understand here is that this frost damage on Avalanche actually goes onto each target that your Howling Blast hits. So I've noticed it hits from about anywhere from 15 to like 3k, man. It's really a pretty good, and this is Frozen Pulse. I've read a couple articles and they're saying run Frozen Pulse. Avalanche has worked better for me. Frost Scythe is actually really good if you are running the Obliteration build because it does activate, so Pillar of Frost makes your Frost Scythe also crit. So Frost Scythe is a sweeping attack that strikes up to 5 enemies in front of you for 272 frost damage. This attack benefits from Killing Machine. Critical strikes from Frost Strike deal 4 times the normal amount of damage. So I've played around with Frost Scythe a little bit. It does do good. The rotation's a little choppy. I'm not a huge fan of the rotation just because I do feel like between my remorseless winter and my Howling Blast and then like putting down my Death's Due and doing Obliterate, like I feel like I have enough AoE, and the Frost Scythe kind of just doesn't play well with it, but it is good and can be fun But I'll show you here kind of like how it chops up the rotation. So I'm going to go in Howling Blast, put down my Death Stew, Warless Winter, and I'm going to start proccing my Killing Machine. And you can just see, like, especially with my Death Stew up, my Death Stew with my Obliteration just hit over a little over 10k. So those are huge. And then at that time, like, I just kind of go off my Obliteration single target damage, and it keeps up with most AoE damage, man. I mean, I'm hitting hard. Tier 5 is going to be our survivability tier. Death Pack being my favorite in this tier, just simply for the 50% maximum health heal that you get. It's really saved my life in multiple situations at this point, and I take it over Wraithwalk simply because I already have the soul shape from my covenant, from the Night Fae covenant. So really, Death Pack is the one optimal for me to take. Permafrost, really, it's your auto attack damage grants you an absorb shield equal to 40% of your damage dealt. Now that's damage dealt of your auto attack, which I've kind of simmed it a little bit. It's not a lot. It's like a couple thousand, and I mean, let's be honest, that's just not a lot. So I would take Death Pact here. It's an on-use heal, so it's great for saving your. Moving on to tier 6, I really like the passive ability Gathering Storm. Each rune spent during Remorseless Winter increases the damage by 10% and extends its duration by 5 seconds. So with running the Obliteration build, you are going to lack a very slim amount of AoE damage that you're going to be missing from the Breath of Cindergrosa, and that's just on an overall spectrum. With that being said, Gathering Storm is really a good way to be able to utilize your Remorseless Winter to its max. And if you're running the Conduit Everfrost, it actually increases your Remorseless Winter damage by an additional 3%, and I believe that stacks up to 3 times. We'll be going over that here shortly. So it's my favorite. The Hypothermic Presence isn't bad. I haven't been able to put it into a rotation that's really outdone the Gathering Storm, especially on AoE overall, because when I'm doing a boss fight, my Obliteration, it just kind of carries me through the fight on top of the meters. Glacial Advance is just bad. It's not really an option. I mean, it's a cool little ability, so if you want to use it for just the look of it, go ahead. But it's really just bad. So the 7th and final tier, here we are. I know this guide might seem like I'm just obliteration build. It's because I am. Obliteration, and unless you are in the Venthyr Covenant and have Swarming Mist and have that access to all that runic power, Breath of Cindergrosa is the way to go. With that being said, that's all your eggs in one basket. I like the Obliteration build with the dual wield Obliteration build better because I'm more flexible. I can do incredible AoE damage for trash, and then I still show up on the boss fights. So for the two-handed Obliteration build, your talent tree should look something like this. And for the dual wield Obliteration build, your talent tree should look like this. So moving on to our rotation for the dual wield Obliteration build, what I like to do is I pop my Pillar of Frost, I go in, I use Howling Blast, put down my Death Stew, use Obliterate, Frost Strike, Obliterate, pop my Remorseless Winter, Frost Strike, Obliterate, then redo Howling Blast, Frost Strike, and then you also want to make sure to use your Empowered Rune Weapon to make sure you're getting all the runes. And then that's basically it, rinse and repeat. You never want to cap your runic power, so you want to use your Frost Strike to dump runic power, and then use Howling Blast on Rhyme, and then dump your runic power with Frost Strike. Make sure you pop your Remorseless Winter on cooldown, use your Howling Blast on Rhyme, and then you should be good to go. With that being said, make sure you also use your Frostworm Fury, for it is an insane amount of damage. So next thing I want to go over is going to be the legendaries and the conduits that you're going to want to get after. So starting with conduits, your by far best is going to be Everfrost. Everfrost makes your Remorseless Winter deal 3.6 increased damage to enemies it hits, stacking up to 10 times. So that's a potential 36% increase in damage with Remorseless Winter, stacked on top of Gathering Storm, which gives it an extra 10% and extends its duration by 0.5 seconds for every rune spent. So that's an insane amount of damage that you could potentially be putting out with an ability that really is kind of just a filler. So if you don't get your hands on that, which I just picked up by World Quest, by the way, fairly easy to pick up. But if you can't get your hands on that, if you did pick the Night Fae Covenant, Withering Ground is also a good second backup. Death's Due deals 50% increased damage, which, I mean, that's a pretty significant amount. I mean, 50% increased damage, who can complain? If you can't get your hands on either one of those and you are maybe looking for more of a single target, the other side actually drops Eradicating Blow, and Obliterating increases the damage of your next Frost Strike by 7.2%, stacks up to 2 times. So that's actually huge. On Mythic, it's actually 7.8%. So I would recommend getting that if you're looking for single target, especially if you're going for the Obliterate build and those Frost Strikes. So those are going to be the conduits you're going to be looking for. So the legendaries, so I actually kind of messed up and I didn't get all the soul ash I needed to on week 1, so I gotta wait till week 3 to make mine, which is fine because the first one we're going to want to make is actually in Castle Netheria, which is going to be the Memory of Koltira. Now this is extremely good because it makes it so you get Koltira's Favor, which deals 10% increase obliterates and has a 12% chance to refund 2 runes. So that's going to be really good in all aspects, single target, and if you are running the Breath of Cinegrosa build, that 2 rune refund is going to be detrimental if you want to put out some more obliterates and build up your runic power. So I've actually read that it's going to be good for the Breath of Cinegrosa build as well, but it is going to be your best in slot when it comes to the obliteration build. You can go to the Necrotic Wake and get the Memory of the Biting Cold, which makes it so your Remorseless Winter damage is increased by another 30%. The first time Remorseless Winter damage you to 3 different enemies, you gain Rhyme. My plan is to do Kotora's Favor first, but then after that I'm going to do Memory of Biting Cold. Alright guys, well, as a summary for the Frost Death Knight, I think that the spec has definitely gotten a lot of much needed tweaks. I mean, just through conduits and legendaries and just the talent changes, we have definitely seen an increase in the AoE aspect of where we kind of fell behind Unholy back in BFA and even Legion. So we're definitely stepping it back up, and we're going to be contenders in AoE for sure. I mean, 100%. And then I think the Obliteration build is the way to go. I mean, as of right now, looking forward to week 3, Castle Netheria coming out. I'm hoping to get that legendary on the week 1, and I look forward to playing Frost throughout Shadowlands. Well, that's a wrap, everybody. Thanks for watching, and if you found this guide useful, be sure to subscribe, hit that thumbs up, and leave a comment down below letting me know how you plan on progressing your Death Knight through Shadowlands. Thanks again, and stay frosty.